Vivian sat by the window, her eyes following the way the morning light broke through the glass. The world outside was full of sound, children laughing on their way to school, birds calling from the trees, the hum of cars passing by. But for Vivian, there was no sound that belonged to her. Her voice had been taken from her when she was only a child. When she was 6, she had been a girl with laughter as loud as a bell. She would sing to her mother while helping in the kitchen, songs made up of words that made no sense but carried joy. Her father used to clap and say that one day the world would know her name. But then came the accident. A fire in the house, smoke filling every corner, and when she screamed for help, something broke inside her throat. The doctors saved her life, but her voice never came back. The silence that followed was heavier than the fire had been. She grew up in a world where people looked at her with pity. She learned to write quickly, to use her hands to express what she could not say. Still, her heart longed for the music that once filled her days. Her best friend Sarah always stood by her side. Sarah would speak what Vivian wanted to say, and she would defend her from cruel whispers at school. But even Sarah could not understand the ache that lived inside Vivian, the ache of wanting to be heard. Years passed. Vivian became a young woman, graceful and quiet. People often thought she was fragile, but inside her was a strength no one could see. She carried notebooks filled with songs she could not sing, lyrics that waited for a voice that was lost. One evening, while sitting in her room, Vivian pressed her hand over her chest. She could feel her heartbeat. The songs lived there, trapped like birds in a cage. She wished the world could hear them, wished someone would understand that silence did not mean emptiness. Her brother James, older and protective, sometimes told her to let go of the dream. He believed she needed to find peace in what she had, to accept that her voice was gone. But Vivian could not. She wrote late into the night, her pen scratching against paper, creating melodies that only she could hear in her mind. One day, Josh, a boy from her neighborhood, came to visit. He was known for playing the guitar, often heard practicing in the evenings when the streets were quiet. He carried his guitar everywhere, and when he played, people stopped to listen. He was different from others, for he never looked at Vivian with pity. Instead, he looked at her like she was whole. As they sat together in the garden, he asked if she had ever written songs. Vivian hesitated, then pulled out one of her notebooks. Josh took it, his eyes moving over the words. When he looked up, there was something bright in his face. "These are beautiful," he said softly. Vivian lowered her gaze, unable to answer. He strummed a chord on his guitar and began to hum the words she had written. Her heart raced as she listened. It was as if her voice had returned, carried by his song. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, the silence around her cracked, just a little. And in that moment, Vivian realized something she had never believed before. Even if her own voice was gone, maybe the world could still hear her song.
Viv could not stop thinking about the moment in the garden, the sound of Josh's guitar, his voice shaping the words she had written. It was like sunlight breaking into a dark room. She carried that memory with her all night, unable to sleep, her heart alive with a hope she thought she had buried long ago. The next morning, she found herself standing at the edge of her desk, staring at the pile of notebooks filled with songs. She touched the covers one by one, as if greeting old friends. So many times she had written and closed the books, believing no one would ever see them. Now she wondered, what if the songs could breathe? What if they could live outside the pages? Sarah came to visit that day. She noticed the way Vivian's eyes glowed brighter than usual. Sitting beside her, Sarah asked if something had happened. Vivian hesitated, then handed her the notebook Josh had read. Sarah flipped through the pages, her lips moving silently as she read the words. When she finished, she looked at Vivian with wide eyes. "These are powerful," Sarah whispered. "You should share them." Viv shook her head quickly, fear rushing in. She had always been afraid of people laughing, of them saying she was foolish to dream without a voice. But Sarah took her hand gently and said, "Sometimes what is hidden needs to be seen." Later that evening, Josh returned, his guitar slung over his shoulder. He smiled in a way that calmed her fears. "I was thinking," he said, "would you let me play more of your songs? Maybe just for friends first?" Viv felt her heart tremble. The thought of others hearing her words frightened her, yet it also stirred something deep inside. She nodded slowly. The following week, Josh invited Vivian to his house. The living room was warm with soft lights, and his younger sister, Linda, was there, curious and kind. Josh set the notebook on the table and began to play. As his fingers moved over the strings, his voice carried Vivian's lyrics across the room. Vivian closed her eyes. She could almost imagine the sound coming from her own throat, as if the silence inside her was finally lifting. Linda clapped her hands in delight when the song ended. "These words feel alive," she said, "like they come from the heart." Viv smiled shyly, her cheeks warm. As the days passed, the small circle grew. Josh suggested performing the songs in front of more people. He spoke of open mic nights in small cafes where young artists shared their voices. The idea terrified Vivian, but the thought of her words finally reaching beyond her notebooks made her pulse quicken. James, her brother, was less convinced. When Vivian told him about Josh's idea, he frowned. "Are you sure about this, Vivian?" he said. "People can be cruel. I don't want you hurt again." But Vivian only wrote on her notepad and showed it to him. The words clear and strong, "I want them to hear me." James sighed, but he saw the determination in her eyes. He nodded, knowing she would not turn back. The night of the first open mic came quickly. The small cafe buzzed with chatter and laughter, the smell of coffee and baked bread filling the air. Vivian sat nervously in a corner, clutching her notebook. Her hands shook, but Josh squeezed her shoulder and whispered, "Trust me." When his name was called, Josh walked onto the small stage with his guitar. The lights were dim, but they cast a warm glow over him. He opened the notebook, and then he began to play. As the first notes filled the room, Vivian felt her heart rise. His voice carried her words, words she had written in silence, now floating into the ears of strangers. She glanced around. People had stopped talking, their faces turned toward the stage, listening closely. When the song ended, there was a silence, then a burst of applause. Vivian's breath caught in her throat. They had listened. They had felt her song. She sat very still, tears slipping down her cheeks. And for the first time since the fire, Vivian knew her silence had not won. Her song had found its way into the world.
The applause from the cafe echoed in Vivian's mind long after the night had ended. She sat awake in her room, staring at her notebook, her fingers brushing the words she had written. She thought of the faces in the audience, the way they had leaned closer, the way their eyes had softened. For the first time, her heart felt light, almost free. The next morning, Sarah came rushing into Vivian's house, excitement in her voice. "Everyone is talking about last night," she said. "People loved your song. You should have seen the way they were whispering afterward, wondering who had written it." Vivian smiled, her lips curving gently, though fear still lingered in her chest. She wanted people to hear her songs, but she did not know if she was ready to step out of the shadows. Josh visited later that day, guitar strapped across his back. He looked at Vivian with steady eyes. "They loved it," he said softly, "but this is just the beginning. We should do more, Vivian." She hesitated, but the fire in his voice gave her courage. She nodded slowly, handing him another notebook. Together, they began to rehearse. Evenings in the garden turned into nights filled with music. Josh played while Vivian watched, guiding him with her notes, sometimes clapping to show the rhythm she imagined. Though her lips never moved to sing, her eyes spoke louder than words, glowing with passion. One evening, while practicing, James came to watch. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. At first, his face was serious, but as the song filled the air, his expression softened. When the last chord faded, he clapped lightly and said, "I didn't believe this could work, Vivian, but you were right." His approval meant more to her than he realized. She smiled at him, her eyes shimmering. Soon, Josh convinced her to let him share more of her songs at different cafes. Every performance drew more people. Strangers began asking about the songwriter behind the lyrics. Some thought it was Josh, but he always pointed to Vivian, sitting quietly at the back. People would turn to look at her, their eyes full of curiosity, and she would bow her head, shy but proud. One night, after a performance, a man approached Josh. He introduced himself as Mr. Thomas, a music producer who often visited small events to discover new talent. "I can hear something powerful in these songs," he said. "They carry truth. Whose words are they?" Josh smiled and gestured toward Vivian. She froze, her heart pounding, as the man's eyes landed on her. "She cannot sing," Josh explained gently, "but she writes every lyric. She is the voice behind the music, even if she cannot speak." Mr. Thomas studied Vivian for a long moment, then nodded. "Sometimes, the strongest voices are the ones that fight the hardest to be heard." He handed Josh a card. "I would like to hear more," he said. When they left the cafe that night, Vivian's steps were unsteady. She felt both afraid and alive. Josh grinned, his voice bubbling with excitement. "This could be something big, Vivian. The world might finally hear you." But fear whispered inside her. What if people laughed? What if they said she was foolish? She sat on her bed that night, staring at the notebooks stacked high. The weight of years of silence pressed on her. Then she remembered the faces at the cafe, the way people had listened, the way their applause had washed over her like a wave. For so long she had believed her silence made her invisible, but maybe, just maybe, her songs could make her seen. She closed her eyes and pressed her notebook to her chest. No matter how afraid she was, she knew one thing now. Her voice might be silent, but her song was alive, and the world was finally beginning to hear it.
Days turned into weeks, and Vivian's songs began to spread beyond the small cafes. Josh recorded himself performing her lyrics and uploaded them online. At first, only a few people listened, but slowly the numbers grew. Strangers left comments saying the words touched their hearts, that the songs carried emotions they could not describe. Vivian would sit beside Sarah, reading the comments one by one, her eyes filled with tears each time someone wrote, "This song saved me," or "I feel like this was written for me." She had never imagined her silence could reach across miles and touch people she had never met. Mr. Thomas invited Josh and Vivian to his studio. It was the first time Vivian stepped into a place filled with microphones, instruments, and bright lights. The walls carried the weight of music history, and she felt both small and important. Mr. Thomas listened to more of her lyrics, his face thoughtful.
"These songs need to be heard by more people," he said. "We will record them properly. Let the world see what is hidden here." Vivian's hands trembled as she wrote in her notebook, "Are you sure people will care?" Mr. Thomas smiled kindly. "Songs born from pain often shine the brightest," he said. The recording sessions began. Vivian would sit quietly with her notebook while Josh sang. Sometimes she would hum very softly to herself, though no sound came. Her lips formed the words, and Josh followed her lead. They became a team, his voice carrying the strength of her silence. But as the songs began to gain attention, not everyone was kind. Online comments shifted. While many praised the music, others mocked. Some wrote, "How can someone without a voice call herself a songwriter?" Others said Josh was the real talent and Vivian was just hiding behind him. When Sarah showed Vivian these comments, Vivian's heart sank. She locked herself in her room for hours, staring at the notebooks stacked around her. Doubt gnawed at her. Maybe the cruel voices were right. Maybe she was nothing without Josh. James knocked on her door that evening. When she did not answer, he walked in quietly. He sat beside her and said, "People will always find a way to bring others down. But Vivian, I have watched you all my life. Your silence never broke you. Don't let their words break you now." His voice was steady, and for the first time, Vivian saw the pride in his eyes. She nodded slowly, her heart warming. Soon after, Mr. Thomas arranged for Josh and Vivian's songs to be performed at a small city concert. The crowd was larger than anything they had faced before. The lights shone brightly, and Vivian's palms sweated as she clutched her notebook. Backstage, Josh leaned close and whispered, "Tonight, they will hear you, Vivian, not me, you." When he stepped on stage, the audience cheered. Vivian stood in the shadows, watching as he began to sing her words. The sound filled the hall, echoing beautifully. But then something unexpected happened. Halfway through the song, Josh paused, his voice steady as he spoke into the microphone. "These words belong to someone very special, someone who cannot sing them herself, but who has given me the honor to share them. Her name is Vivian." The crowd turned their heads, searching the shadows, until the lights followed and found her. Vivian froze, her heart racing. Hundreds of eyes were on her, and for a moment she wanted to run. But then she saw Sarah and James in the crowd, their faces glowing with pride. Slowly, she stepped forward. She could not speak, but she bowed her head slightly, holding her notebook close. The audience began to clap, first softly, then louder, until the sound filled the hall. Vivian's chest ached, not with pain, but with something greater. The world was seeing her, not just her silence, but her song, and for the first time, she did not feel invisible.
The night of the concert changed everything. For days afterward, people spoke about the mysterious girl whose words had captured so many hearts. Videos of the performance spread quickly online, and Vivian's name began to appear in headlines. Some called her the silent songwriter. Others said her silence made her songs even louder. Vivian sat at home, overwhelmed by it all. She would scroll through messages from strangers across the world, people from America, Canada, Australia, Nigeria, all saying the same thing. "Your words gave me strength. Your songs feel like my story." Each message lit a flame inside her, burning away the years of doubt. Mr. Thomas met with Vivian and Josh one afternoon. He leaned across his desk, his voice serious but full of excitement. "There is something rare here," he said. "People connect to your songs because they come from a place of truth. I want to help you release an album, not just with Josh's voice, but with your presence, Vivian." Vivian wrote quickly in her notebook, "But I cannot sing."
Mr. Thomas nodded. You don't have to. You can be on the stage. You can be in the videos. You can tell your story through your words. Music is more than a voice. It is the soul behind it. With Josh's encouragement and Sarah's constant support, Vivian agreed. They worked day and night in the studio, polishing her songs. Sometimes she would guide Josh with a simple gesture or by tapping a rhythm on the table. Her silence no longer felt like weakness. It felt like her strength. The album was released months later, and it spread far faster than they imagined. Radio stations played the songs, people shared them endlessly, and soon Vivian and Josh were invited to perform at a large festival. The festival night arrived with lights brighter than the stars. Tens of thousands filled the grounds, their voices buzzing like a living sea. Vivian stood backstage, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. Josh squeezed her hand and whispered, "This is your moment." As they walked onto the stage, the crowd roared. Josh began to strum his guitar, and the first notes of one of Vivian's most personal songs filled the night. When he sang, the words soared over the audience, weaving into their hearts. Then something unexpected happened. The crowd began to sing along. Thousands of voices joined together, repeating the lyrics Vivian had once written alone in her quiet room. Her eyes widened, her chest tightening. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling freely. She could not sing with them, but she felt her voice alive in every note they sang. The silence that had once trapped her was gone, replaced by a chorus of people who carried her song for her. When the final chord rang out, the crowd erupted. Josh turned to Vivian, holding the microphone out toward her. Though no sound would come, she stepped forward, raised her notebook high, and on the open page were written the words, "Thank you for hearing me." The crowd cheered louder than ever before, some shouting her name, others lifting their hands in the air. In that moment, Vivian felt whole. The world had not just heard her song, they had understood it. And afterward, as the night sky stretched endlessly above them, Vivian stood with Sarah, James, Linda, and Josh by her side. She looked up at the stars and smiled. Her silence had once been a prison, but now it was her story, her gift. She had lost her voice, but she had found something greater. She had found a way to speak to the world without ever making a sound. And at last, the world listened.